Welcome to Nonprofit Thrive, a podcast where we learn from the humans who are helping nonprofits succeed in the digital world. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome. I'm Ben Freda, host of the show. And on this show, we learn from the smart people in the nonprofit space. The people behind the organizations, the foundations, the agencies that help nonprofits change the world, particularly on the web. We have had several episodes at this point. We're still starting out, you can probably tell. But go back and listen to a couple of episodes that we recorded in the past. Episode number 2, we had Jake Wunsch from Media Law Resources Center on. He talked about how he uses a daily email every day to his membership to talk about any news cases in the First Amendment space. And he manages to get a 50% open rate on this, which blew my mind. So go and listen to that. See what he's doing right. Something. Another episode you might want to check out. We just interviewed Laura Quinn. She is ex of Idealware. Now she is a website analyst and coach. And she helped us understand about metrics. So how to start considering what metrics in your digital assets, your website, your web apps that you want to start looking at. That, of course, is one of those holes in the Swiss cheese of my knowledge about this stuff is how to figure out exactly what metrics to use. So that was super helpful. Go back and listen to that. Before I introduce today's guest, who is equally awesome, I have to tell you, this podcast is brought to you by BFC Digital, where we help nonprofits thrive on the web. If you work at a nonprofit or a foundation or another type of social change organization, I'm sure you know that unless you're doing a big old web project, multiple tens of thousands of dollars, it can be really tricky to find reputable, responsive, friendly, helpful help for your website. At BFC Digital, we help our clients succeed on the web by being the web colleagues, designers, developers you wish you had on your own team. For a low monthly price, we can help you fix your bugs, evolve your web presence. We can design new campaign pages for you. We can integrate your new donation system into your website, and we can do it without ever asking you to fill out a support ticket. No support tickets, promise. Go to bfcdigital.com to learn more. So for today, I am super psyched. I do have to give a shout out to Emily Culbertson, who I interviewed in episode 4, who recommended this guest to me, who I found out I already knew, which was a lucky twist of fate. Today we have Debbie McCann, who started W4Sight in 2009. She is an expert at helping nonprofits and foundations resolve their software issues and their data-related issues. She actually started with a degree in American history, but she just proves that a liberal arts degree means you can really do anything. Her favorite consulting task, she claims, is data conversion, which thank God, because we need people who love doing that. Debbie, thank you for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
I'm very excited to have you on because this software selection, data conversion stuff is like one of those big black clouds people see in the horizon and they're like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with it? So I'm super psyched. Before we get into that stuff, though, I want to just sort of understand like how you got to where you are now. It says you were a history major, American history.
American history.
So what happened? What happened there? You started as a history major, and then what happened?
I think what it really comes down to is that I was looking for something to do where I could help people. Mm-hmm. And usually when people are looking to be in the helping professions, you find them in medicine or you find them in mental health, some very direct line to helping people. And I come from a whole family of mental health professionals. And I think my form of rebellion was, I still want to help people, just not the way you people do it. I got to do something on my own. And so I found my way to public policy as my outgrowth of American history. How do we as Americans, do things differently as a society? And that got me into an interest in public policy where I earned a master's degree. And then, like everybody, I had some good jobs. I had some less good jobs. Mm-hmm. And what I really found in the end is that I loved large scale project management. And I loved the more technical side of things that I really never did learn about in the history department. And I sort of fell into software project management as an opportunity that presented itself at an opportune time.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am. I mean, I learned all of those skills on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely what I took from my background, in American history and then later, in public policy is that if you can be organized and have a very structured way of thinking, that can take you in a lot of different directions. So here I am.
Hey, that's interesting. That's interesting. I do remember I was a public policy major as well.
See?
So I'm glad to meet another public policy nut.
Exactly.
And I remember when I was graduating, the big things you could do with a public policy degree that everyone else was doing was either go to law school or go be a management consultant. Those were the things that everybody wanted to do.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Was that it? Was that the way it was for you?
No, not at all. Coming out of undergrad, I took a year off and then applied during that year to public policy programs. And I had been very interested up until that point in education policy, not so much the curriculum stuff in the classroom, but more education as a system, how school districts function, how state agencies function. So when I started my policy degree, it was with that focus. Although I learned, because I was at the University of Chicago, where the degree is not in public policy, it was in public policy studies. We just study things at the University of Chicago. We don't do things, we study them. It's a very, very specific way of thinking, the Chicago way. And so the emphasis was on, is this program or policy effective? I became a social program evaluation person. That's what I learned to do. And those technical skills do carry over into the other things.
For sure.
But management consulting was not a huge thing at the time. So I ended up coming out of that job or out of that degree, working for a small nonprofit as a policy analyst, modeling changes in school finance legislation, like which school districts would win, which school districts would lose. And I was the one who had to build and run the model every time there was a new legislative proposal to figure out which school districts would be happy and which would be sad.
That makes total sense. And it does actually connect to that data stuff. I remember in class and in my major, we were looking at, like you said, we're looking at changes in the law and what are the costs and what are the benefits. And you think, and you like add them up. Is the benefit greater than the cost? And you're just adding up things on both sides. And it can be super tricky because what are the benefits to a new stadium in downtown Manhattan? Let's say they're thinking about putting.
What are the assumptions you need to make, et cetera? Yeah.
So there's X amount of more, I don't know, food bought in the neighborhood, which equals X amount of sales revenue, sales tax revenue equals whatever. But it's really complicated. It gets very complicated very fast.
Well, there was a time in, let's say 1994, that I was one of maybe 5 people in the state of Illinois who could write the funding formula for public schools K-12 on the blackboard.
Yeah.
And so every time there was a legislative change to that formula, I could model it because I could just do the algebra. We're going to change this variable. We're going to change this multiplier. We're going to change this assumption. And I had a model that could spit out all those changes. So that was my party trick, back then.
I bet you were a riot at parties, just a lot of fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I could also keep score in bowling, which is also a skill that has kind of gone by the way of the dinosaur. But adaptation is critical. So I have adapted to new challenges.
Were you a big bowler?
No. But the fact that I knew how to keep score was, I felt like one of those things that other people were very scared of. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I can't. It's hard for me to even imagine a time before the score was kept automatically by those computer
things. I know.
Things.
It used to be on paper.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. So you were, so you found American history, you went to public policy, you found actually I'm pretty good at figuring out this data stuff. Yeah. And you worked at a nonprofit for a while, and then what happened?
Well, in that nonprofit, because I was studying school finance and its impact on policy changes, I could read the tea leaves enough to know nothing about this issue is going to change anytime soon. And fast forward 30 years, guess what? Illinois public schools are still funded primarily by property taxes, leading to great inequity between rich and poor districts.
Right.
There's your clue. So I was frustrated at the idea that I could be working on the same thing for 30 years and nothing would change. So that prompted me to look for something that was a little bit more dynamic, that I felt like had a little bit more going on. And in that school finance work, I ended up working with a consulting team that actually had a software product that analyzed how schools spent their money.
Oh, wow.
And that's what got me to switch gears and learn something about how software worked, which taught me something about how consulting worked. And that led me to a whole other series of jobs. But eventually, I was interested in not traveling anymore because I was getting married, starting a family, and taking those skills and applying them to a public institution was a good next step. I was a deputy CIO at the city of Chicago for 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
And in the public sector, had the opportunity to take that software experience, take that public policy experience, and implement huge new systems for the city. New building permit and inspection system, first online car sticker sales system. Like this was groundbreaking stuff in the year 2000,
Oh, for sure.
I survived Y2K at the city. Things that seem almost quaint now. But were big challenges at the time and taught me a lot about big databases, big transformation projects, dealing with big people impact. That's a lot of building inspectors who had to learn how to use a new system.
Totally. And everybody owns a car has to get the new registration sticker or whatever. I mean, yeah, you're talking about stuff that affects like your friends.
Right. And I learned a new party trick, actually. I learned how to decode a VIN number on a car, that each component of that number corresponds to the year, the make, the model, the color, a few other things probably. And I learned how to decode your driver's license number. That even that is basically a version of your name embedded in alphanumeric code.
Is that true in New York as well and everywhere?
I don't know. I only worked in Illinois, but I mean, and I couldn't really decode somebody's license to figure out their name, but I learned enough that it was fascinating. I thought that was cool. So that's more stuff that just, put me on the data conversion transformation train, I suppose.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's funny looking back. Like, here's what sticks out, that I could convert the data of the number to the. That's interesting. That just tells you where your brain's at. That's cool.
Exactly. That was cool.
I know this is off track, but I'm interested in what it was like working for the city of Chicago. Good things, bad things?
It's fascinating. I mean, it's a huge institution. And what it's like today, I have no idea because I left that work almost 20 years ago. But for the time that I was there, it was an amazing opportunity for a young person. I started there when I was 29 to have a tremendous amount of responsibility, really way more responsibility than I should have had, to implement a very large, very expensive system and have to convince, hundreds of end users that, they needed to change what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. So it was an awesome growth opportunity. It was political, and there were times where, you had to shake your head at the decisions being made or the change in direction. I worked for the Mayor Daley, administration, which it's a political environment. And so the mayor is out on a drive-by through some neighborhood and you'd get a memo that says, okay, we're doing this now. Because, that's what the mayor noticed that day on his way to some meeting. And that could upend your entire plan for the year.
Yeah, I could see that being super frustrating. It would seem a little arbitrary. Yeah, but on
the whole, though, I look back on that experience very fondly. I met some amazing people and got a chance to really learn a ton.
Yeah, totally. So you work for I can imagine. I'm just interested because being in New York City, there's all kinds of things that people can do that affect, in the government that would affect everyone's life to a great degree,
Right.
And it seems like a really interesting place to work. So you're in the city of Chicago, and at what point do you decide, all right, I'm ready to not travel so much. Right. I want to start my own agency.
I didn't quite start with that intent. At the time that I left the city, I felt like I had learned what I was going to learn there. And I had had enough of some of those political roadblocks that I felt like, I could take these skills and apply them in a different environment. I liked the fact that I was working in a public-facing public institution. But I felt like I'd sort of learned what that was about, and that perhaps I would have the opportunity to do that working with, we didn't call it the social impact sector back then, but I really wanted to stay focused on some sort of mission-oriented work. But I did not want a job because at that point, I had 2 little kids, and I didn't think anybody would give me a job that would allow me the flexibility that I hope that we're providing with our team members now at W4Sight.
Right.
But back then, I didn't even have any expectation that someone would let me volunteer at preschool and only work part-time and, the things that I was looking to do. And so I thought, you know what, I'll try getting some stuff on my own. If it doesn't work out, I can revise my expectations and, I'll look for a job. So my husband was a huge supporter and he said, yep, let's give it 6 to 12 months. Let's see what happens. And it worked out. Here we are.
Yeah. It's such a common story of people the people that I talk to, particularly on the podcast, we sort of have two types of guests, one from nonprofits, but also people from agencies like yours. It's such a common thing and happened to me too, where basically had a kid and started freelancing at the same time, and that's where it starts. You're like, oh shoot, I really want to be around for the preschool and you need the flexible type situation and all that kind of stuff. And same thing. I was like, well, I have a kid. I'm going to take a few jobs and just see if I can turn this into something. And I remember telling my wife at the time, no longer my wife, which is maybe related to this problem, but I remember telling her, don't worry, I'll make at least as much as we have to pay the nanny. You know what I mean? Because we had a part-time nanny as well.
Yeah.
Which of course did not happen the first year.
Oh.
and but that's kind of, but I was like, it's so flexible anyway. So, but that is really, really common, I think, where, you end up taking on some freelance jobs and then you take on some more and then you slowly like grow this thing and just from word of mouth or whatever.
Oh, right. One thing leads to another. And I mean, that's where I really look back on the importance of that public policy degree experience. It wasn't in the end so much what I learned as the people that I met, because by the time I was looking to do that independent work, the people who I turned to were my friends. And like, here's what I'm trying to do. Who do you know? Can I help your organization? Because for the most part, they were working in nonprofit organizations and in government sector. And some of my early projects, I initially, made those contacts through people that I had met in grad school.
Right.
And, fast forward another 20 years, they're all in leadership positions now in really awesome institutions. And so there have been opportunities to continue working with people that I know and trust and, be really excited about the impact that we're able to have.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you started W4Sight. Is the name of it, am I right that it's basically with foresight?
Yes and no, a little bit.
Okay.
So when I first left the city, I started my own independent company.
Gotcha.
And worked by myself for a few years. But one of the things that I learned in working by myself is that it can be lonely to work by yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
It can also lead to some opportunities that you miss out on because the client is worried about hiring a solopreneur, right? Like what happens if you're sick or your kid is sick or whatever, there's nobody backing you up. So started connecting with some other women, as it turned out, who were doing similar but not exactly the same work. And we thought, you know what if we went at this together? So the W4 was for women at the time, working with Foresight for our clients. And that's where the name came from. So I started on my own in 2006, but by 2009, it was pretty clear that we might be stronger together. And so we started essentially a fifth company because we all had our own companies already. We started a fifth one, and it took a few years to wind down our independent work. But by 2012, 2013, we were all in with W4Sight.
Wow. And are all four of you still there?
I am the last remaining co-founder. One of our co-founders fairly early on realized, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to go back to my independent work for various personal reasons, which was fine. We wished her well. But the three of us who remained stuck with it until people started retiring. So I was the youngest one of the bunch. And so my two other co-founders who were with the company for quite a while are now both retired and happily, moving on to other projects. But we have been able to grow the company in that time to also include a number of other team members, which is really exciting.
Yeah, totally. The first getting staff is awesome. That moment.
Yeah, and it took a while before we were ready to make that step beyond just the four of us. In 2017, we hired our first employee. And I wanted to get her a mug, employee number one.
That's cool.
Cool. Yeah, that was a great experience.
So tell me a little bit about what you guys do. So you are focused on helping organizations figure out what their software needs are. Is that?
So yeah, our work tends to fall into one of three buckets. Ecosystem assessment and design, I would say, is the first bucket. And that's the one that in the broadest way, helps organizations look at their software tools and how they work together and whether or not they could be optimized to work together more efficiently.
Gotcha.
Often folks know that they have a giant pile of spaghetti. Things have organically evolved over time, and people made decisions that were the best decisions they knew how to make at the time, but nobody was thinking big picture about how will the marketing tool interact with the donor management tool, with the events registration tool, with our website, with this, with that. So we help organizations take a fresh look at the whole set of stuff. What do you keep? What do you fix? What do you start over with? So that your enterprise ecosystem is well functioning and efficient. That's the goal.
Gotcha.
So that's one bucket. Our second bucket is, coming out of that work, often there are specific software tools that should be replaced or that you don't have at all. And as an organization should be part of your tool set. And so we help with software selection and implementation. And many times the organizations that we're working with are terrified of making a wrong decision, or if they've made the decision, having the wherewithal to actually get the software up and running. Those are just skill sets in, a lot of nonprofits just don't exist. And so outsourcing it for a period of time and helping you build capacity is a really important part of being able to get from ecosystem concept to ecosystem reality.
Right.
And then our third bucket of work is that we do provide some ongoing support. The way that we would prefer to do that in most instances is to onboard with an off-ramp in mind, so that we are really focused on helping our clients build internal capacity so that there will come a time when they don't need us. Our goal is not to stick around forever.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You're training somebody there who can sort of take the ball and continue to run with it.
Exactly.
So how do you, and I know you have a method sort of that you use to look at what ecosystem software is in place and what the changes should be.
Yeah. Our overall philosophy is that you should have a balanced three-legged stool.
Okay.
Everybody understands that a tippy stool or a tippy table, right? You don't want the tippy thing. It's going to make you nuts. So what that means in the context of a software ecosystem is that the three legs of the stool are functionality. It's got to have the tools and the features that you need to get your work done, whatever it is that work is. It's got to be at a cost that is sustainable for your organization.
Right.
If it's too cheap, it probably doesn't have all the functions. If it's too expensive, that's obviously a big risk for your org.
Right.
And it's got to be sustainable from a complexity standpoint.
What do you mean by that?
It's so complicated that it has all these bells and whistles and the features are great. And maybe you even can afford the software itself, but you have no internal capacity to really wrangle and understand it. That leg of the stool is short. And you don't have the capacity to really either leverage all the things that you've now invested in, or you're so overwhelmed by it that you're not using them either. And so that's not a good choice either. And so that's why we end up, in many cases, advising smaller organizations to be cautious about how complex a tool they're willing to commit to. Because if you're going to spend the money to get a complicated tool up and running and then have nobody to work with it, what have you actually achieved?
So are the more complex tools, do they tend to be more expensive?
They certainly can be. And sometimes there's a little bit of a misleading thing out in the market. We work with a lot of organizations who have, for instance, Salesforce, because they heard that it's free for nonprofits. And there is a license program that does allow nonprofits to get certain licenses free.
Okay.
However, Salesforce is not one of those applications that you just open the box and press install and you're good to go. There's a lot in setting it up.
Yeah.
Some orgs are really great at that self-starter, taking all the online courses. There's a tremendous number of resources out there to help you get started. That's not for everybody.
Right.
And the vast majority of folks that we see are folks who either tried it on their own, it didn't work, or they had somebody's hairdresser's, dog walker's cousin help out for a while.
Yep.
Sometimes that's a board member, another volunteer, but then that person goes away and they're left feeling like, I just wanted to add another value to this pick list. And I have no idea why it can't show up on the screen.
I got you.
That's because it's a 9-step process, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's a great tool under the right circumstances and in the right hands. It's not the right tool for every organization. And so that's an example of where somebody's stool is out of balance and, you know, they're looking for some help trying to figure out what they should do instead.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to ask you a question that I asked my friend Ryan Osmek, who was my first episode ever. Yeah, great dude. I was like, hey, well, what if I was starting in an organization tomorrow, just like a really small local organization to clean up my neighborhood, let's say.
Yeah.
What is the first CRM I should get? And he said spreadsheet. Just that's where you start. You start with a spreadsheet and then you kind of go from there, like a Google Doc. It's free, whatever. Just go from there. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you think that there is something?
If you're literally starting with nothing, I think that is actually great advice. And the reason I think that's a helpful tool to get started is that it leads you from disjointed, jumbled thoughts in your heads to structured data. Once you have the discipline to put stuff in a spreadsheet, you're able to have a conversation with folks like us or on your own to figure out, well, what data do I need to track? What's important to me? And if you haven't done any experimenting with writing anything down on a spreadsheet or otherwise, you don't know what your own needs are. So I think maybe what Ryan is really getting at, and I totally agree with, is that you need to know what your requirements are before you invest in anything. And nobody likes to stop and figure that out because the shiny stuff is in doing the demos and seeing what's out there. But we always encourage people, shut all that stuff out. Actually think about what you need so that you are not distracted by the shiny stuff that you, in fact, don't need and don't want to pay for and don't want to be distracted by. It's not going to help.
Right. Exactly. That makes total sense. And I can see why it's tempting too, because you've heard Salesforce out there and you've heard it's free and you're like, this is the most powerful tool. I'm going to jump right in here. And then you get totally lost, discombobulated. It doesn't meet your needs at all.
Right. And we get the question a lot. What's the best CRM?
Yeah. Right.
Right. Well, what's the best car? Right.
Yeah. Right.
What do you need it to do is really the first question toward helping anyone pick the best anything to meet their needs. What are your needs? Because the best car for driving to the grocery store is not the best car to win the Indy 500.
Totally. We get the same question all the time. Should we choose WordPress or Drupal? You know, and I'm like, it totally depends, man. There's not a winner or a loser. There's a right, you know, you got to see what your needs are and there's a right tool for that. But
absolutely. And one of the things I really love about the company that we've created is that we are a system agnostic, independent organization.
I like that about you too. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. We really have a tremendous amount of pride in that. We have been able to build up expertise in a wide range of tools, and we have partnerships with a wide range of software companies, but we do not take anybody's money. We are not revenue partners. We don't get referral fees. So if somebody's going to hire us to help them make a decision, we can help them feel confident that we don't get a kickback from somebody for suggesting that they use whatever.
Yeah.
So it just allows us so much freedom to really help people focus on what do you actually need this tool to do?
And I want to get back to the stool analogy too, but when we're talking about software tools, just for people that are listening who for whom this is kind of somewhat theoretical, we're talking about software tools to do what? Like take donations, track your membership. What else?
Event RSVPs, send out regular communications, but not to your entire list. You know, how about having segmented communications, which is a technical word that just means a subset of your list for people who are interested in some specific thing. I would say that's the biggest range, with one exception. The additional thing is most nonprofits do something they serve clients, or they track cases, or they are advocating for something. Whatever it is that they do, they need to be able to track it so that they can report their impact. And so there is usually some sort of mission-focused tool that allows them to do that. So all the other stuff is important too, the events, the donations, the communications, the website, but that mission-focused tracking tool is critical.
And that might be giving grants, tracking grantees.
Absolutely.
It might be petitions. It might be anything. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. So those are sort of the range of the universe of the tools that you are that nonprofits can adopt to help them do.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So let's get back to that model of analysis. So you've got the three legs of the stool: cost, complexity,
functionality. Yeah.
And thanks. I was going to get that. I was like, okay, I know cost and complexity, functionality, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So go on. You're analyzing those three, and you're trying to make sure that it's sort of not wobbly.
Exactly. And, then that's your stool that you kind of carry with you on this software selection journey. And, imagine that it's a journey, right? You're going to go through a structured process, ideally, to figure out what your requirements are. Make sure that you are incorporating multiple perspectives from your organization in defining those requirements. Don't just ask the people in charge, ask the people who actually do the work. They might have different perspectives. Anybody who's engaged in the process should have either a direct seat at the table, depending on the size of the organization, or at least think about it as a representative democracy. The people who are making the decision need to be thinking not just about their own needs, but who else's needs am I representing in this process to make sure that we are not just picking something that serves one part of the organization well, and we've left out a whole bunch of folks in the work that they do.
Got you.
So defining your needs and making sure you have the appropriate level of input is really critical, but then go through the process of doing demos, see a bunch of tools, make sure you're seeing the same thing from multiple vendors. And often a vendor will have kind of a set script that they want to take you through. It's okay as the customer or the prospective customer to say, I need to see these three things. And to be like you're in charge, right? You are the potential customer. You can drive this process, I think, a little bit more than many people realize they can. They're very often intimidated by the whole thing and therefore passive. And the vendor is just going to do what is comfortable for them. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have your own scenarios that you ask them to do. Ask them if you can get access to a sandbox, because there's nothing like actually looking at it at your pace, even though you haven't had the training. Understood that, and I think that's why some vendors won't allow prospective customers to get a sandbox, because you haven't been trained and they don't want you to be frustrated by something you don't know how to do. And then you assume that the system can't do that.
Right.
I give people a little bit more credit. They can at least appreciate some basics about the system by getting their hands in it, even if they don't know how to do everything.
Interesting.
So do that if you can.
Are most of these demos actually led by like a human? I mean, you're not just watching a video. There's like okay.
It depends on the level of system that you're looking at, the cost structure. The more expensive the system, the more options for personalization in the sales process there are. If you're looking to buy QuickBooks, you can sign up online, get going without ever speaking to a human. Right. That's a mass market, huge scale thing. However, if you really need somebody to walk you through a product like QuickBooks, there are a million resellers who will spend that time with you. You just have to find.
Gotcha.
But if you go to the Intuit website and, are looking for anything, you're going to find a sales number that you can call, but not a personalized demo.
I got you. Okay. But for a lot of them, you can. So like HubSpot or Salesforce or any
they will absolutely.
They will do it for you.
Exactly. Okay. And we, because we are a partner, just because we don't take the referral fee doesn't mean we can't do the demo. So we do have access to a lot of sandbox tools, and that does allow us to be involved in that process with our clients who are doing software selection.
I like that. And be that sort of what's the word? The wobbly wheel, the squeaky wheel that has
We can
questions.
be the squeaky wheel, or the spirit guide is kind of the way that we frame it, because it is a journey, right? You are making a decision at the end. And we even have an image that we use in a presentation where there's a little hiker with a backpack, right? And they really are progressing through this journey. And like any other journey, you want to have a roadmap. You want to pack snacks, right? Don't do this too fast. Don't do it in a way, don't have 3 demos in one day. Think about how you would plan an actual trip. And the rules of the road are not that different. The common sense thing.
Got you. Interesting. Okay.
Seriously, pack snacks. Do not have people sitting in a demo for hours at a time with, no food and drink breaks.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Seriously, have some
snacks.
Have some Kind bars or whatever. Yeah,
totally. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Because nothing makes people more frustrated or less patient with getting into the details of something if they're distracted by some human need, right?
Oh, for sure.
Seriously, do not plan your demo in the 15 minutes before lunch.
Right? Yeah, totally. Hunger is a killer, man. It is. Yeah, and it makes me angry too. People? Yeah, it makes me angry. It makes me pissed off. I'm like, I hate this. But actually, I just have low blood sugar. So.
Right, exactly. I just need something else right now to focus on, and then I can come back to this. So be realistic about what humans can actually absorb and process in one day.
So let me just recap this real quick. Stool, 3 legs, representative democracy, taking consideration everybody's needs on the team, not just your own. Do a lot of demos and take them slow. Anything else on that process part?
Be realistic in your implementation plan. Don't assume that you can get a giant new system implemented in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Most CRM projects, depending again on the size of the organization, and there's a lot of factors that would go into it. But someone who tells you that you can be totally up and running and transition from your old system in 4 to 6 weeks, it is not being honest about the scale of the process. Most organizations, it's a 6 to 9 month project at a certain scale. If you really are tiny and all you have is one Google sheet, then sure, we probably could get you up and running in a few weeks. But part of what you're going to need to focus on is all new business processes, because you're used to doing things a certain way. Give yourself a reasonable amount of time, and trying to shoehorn it in, during your busiest time when you're planning for your largest program or your biggest fundraiser, be realistic about what your capacity is.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. We find that with web projects too, that a lot of times people will sort of underestimate how much effort it's going to be to rewrite their content or gather their content. They might think they have, I have old versions of content, it'll be fine, I'll just do some edits. It takes a while. And it's not just that it takes a while, it's also on top of everything else you're already doing. It's an additional thing. So we find that people tend to underestimate that. So we try and help people not do that. But I'm sure similarly with CRMs, right? It's not just the tool, it's how you're going to change your behavior to use the tool.
Right. That's exactly right. And sometimes that's the part that they really need help with. It's not that the technical aspects of the implementation are all that complicated, but really thinking through what that is going to change in folks' day-to-day life.
For sure.
Humans need a little more time to process and catch up.
Yeah, we do. We're a little bit, we got to process. Speaking of which, and I want to get to this before we end, because, the big shiny thing is AI now, but you might consider that a sort of just an evolution of tools that exist. How do you see, how have you seen the tools that are available for nonprofits change over the last 10 years? And how do you expect them to change over the next 10, if at all? You can be a soothsayer.
I think the thing we've learned in the last 10 years is that nothing should surprise us, right? Things will continue to evolve at a rapid pace. That is just the way of the world that we live in. And AI, is a great example of that. Who was talking about AI 18 months ago? A much smaller group of people.
Right.
So it's not that I don't think AI is important, but whether it's AI or the next shiny thing that happens after AI,
right,
those tools do not replace the need for thoughtful planning and execution.
Thank you. Yeah.
It does not change the fundamentals. If you have no fundraising strategy, AI is not going to help you with your fundraising, right? You have to put something in the prompt for ChatGPT or any other related tools. Will it help you surface patterns in your data that you didn't see before? Sure. But then what are you going to do with them? And the more sophisticated these tools get, in theory, the less we have to think. But I think we've all seen examples of where tools also, they're only working from the information that they've been exposed to. There are gaps, right? You're not really going to turn them loose to represent you without any human oversight. So again, it all comes back to the fundamentals. You really do need to know your own business processes. You do need to have your own goals. Then the tools can support you, but they shouldn't dictate what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So knowing,
and I don't see that changing.
Yeah. They're not going to replace the thinking that you have to do, which is the hard part, right? That's the hard part.
I mean, we may be amazed at how much of a boost it can give a thinking person. You know, I've seen plenty of demos now about, writing donor or prospect, letters and things like that. But it doesn't know the nuances of what you might know about this person. I don't think we're quite ready to give over all of our communications responsibility to the robots quite yet.
So you've seen the robots write donor letters?
Yeah, write drafts of them anyway.
And then people
that you can exactly say, write me a thank you letter in a formal style, and it will spit out, based on what it's been exposed to, however that's happening. A not bad starting point. So if you're someone who's early in your career and you really are like struggling to get started, I can see how those are really attractive shortcuts.
I see. Yeah.
You just don't know what you don't know. And I wouldn't go sending stuff out, without a human getting involved, at least at this stage.
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine, most people, whether you're in the development department, executive director, whatever, and you're writing a thank you letter to say a big donor, you've probably done it before, right? Like, so you're probably, rather than having AI generate the rough draft, I would probably assume you're using your past ones. You know what I mean?
You're not necessarily starting from a blank piece of paper. Exactly. No, that's definitely true. I think we should all be open to the possibilities of what these amazing advances can bring us. Because, we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't embraced change.
Sure.
I think just doing it thoughtfully is an important step.
Yeah.
Not blind.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, listen, before we run out of time, I want to make sure that I give you a chance to tell people, where they can find you, where they can find out more information about your company and what you guys do. Can you give us the 411?
Well, we are on the web and our digital presence at W4Sight.com, and would love to hear from anyone who would like to reach out to us. We do have a contact form on our website. If you are not sure what you need, there's a checkbox for that option on the website as well. We're happy to chat with folks and help them figure out what they need, as a first step. You don't have to have it all figured out just to come and chat.
Yeah, that's one thing I think we should highlight for people. You don't need to know all the answers before you reach out. Like, you know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure, one of the things on the form says, I don't know, but I know I need help.
And again, that's the part that AI cannot give you, the personalized Debbie analysis of your situation.
And my team members as well. We have a great team now. We started in a very different place, but we are welcoming our 10th team member next month. And it's super exciting. Congratulations. Thank you.
It's been really great. I really appreciate it. Is there any last thing that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you that, obviously I these things go so fast when we get into the conversation and I'm like, what? I can't believe it's almost over. Anyway.
I think the thing I would just leave people with is don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, that's what folks like you and I do is, help people who are doing things that are outside of their wheelhouse. It's hard to fake things like data conversion. And it is okay, in fact, to ask for help. And it might not be as expensive as you think, start the conversation and go from there. And, don't try to do it all yourself if it really is something that's causing you great anxiety. We're here to help.
Yeah. And in some ways, I think of people like you and me. And again, we were talking before the show about the mindset and maybe the personalities of people that get into this type of work. But in some ways, I think of us as anxiety reducers. Honestly, that's our job.
Absolutely. Yes. We like to help people help people.
Just just help them be less nervous. I mean, technology can be scary. It's frustrating. You're never going to know everything. It's impossible to know everything. It's always changing. And that can cause a lot of anxiety and frustration and stress, you know, and maybe because of the way we were raised, I'm like, oh, I really want to help with that. Anyway,
we've got this. Don't worry.
Don't worry about it. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure, and always appreciate your expertise. We should do it again at some point. We'll do.
Absolutely. And I'll see you in Portland.
Yes. NTC.
Yes.
Can't wait.
See you next week. This week. Yes. Tomorrow.
This week.
It's this week.
Goodness.
Yes.
Well, by the time this comes out, this will be distant past. Not so distant, maybe a month distant. But yeah, I can't wait.
Yes, I'll look for you. I'll be there. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Thrive podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.